Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to week 9 of the session. We're so excited to see you all again. I'm especially happy to be back. Last week, I planned on seeing you, and then I was stuck on a train at that point in time. But now it's exactly 1 week into our winners trip for the 2020 and 2021 Modiragatsi winners. And I thought that today I would remind you why you are competing. Well, one of the hopefully good reasons why you're competing. Getting some new knowledge and new skills is also very important. But then I think that most of you have in mind that you would like to be the ultimate winners that get to travel with me from the 2nd until the 12th of December this year to this beautiful region where I'm currently streaming from. So what better way to tell you to show you. So I've been showing you video photos of our various visits over the course of the week. But today I thought that I would interview our 2 winners and the teacher that is here with us. I'm very sad that our second teacher, Mrs. John, couldn't make it. Unfortunately, she had some visa issues and she couldn't travel with us. So we're a very small group of 4 traveling through Germany this week, but we're learning a lot. So I'm going to start off with a quick interview with Mrs. Susan Tron from Noordwes-universiteit. And I'm going to ask each of them to tell us why they think this is a good idea, that you enter and participate really well in the competition, what they learned from the experience in competing, but then also what they gained in their experience of traveling with me to Germany. And then I also want to ask them what their favorite parts of this trip so far has been. I think there is still some highlights to come in the next 2 weeks, 2 days. Luckily, we're not yet for 2 more weeks in the next 2 days. But I would like to hear from them how they've experienced this journey thus far. So I told them that I'm asking the questions in English, but they are welcome to answer in whatever language they want to. So if Fabalo wants to answer in Xhosa, she can do that as well. But we won't test her today. So we'll hear from our winners. So firstly, Mrs. Tron, I want to ask you, why do you think this is a good idea for girls to enter the Modiragatsi competition?
I think it's an excellent, absolute wonderful opportunity if you are so lucky enough to be a winner to join this tour. We've been to 3 plants of Siemens this week, and the overall impression I had was one of absolute accuracy, absolutely wonderfully done by engineers, and it opened a new world to me of the world of engineering. So I can go back to school to motivate my learners to study engineering. I think it's a wonderful, there are wonderful career opportunities. It's a wonderful world to work in. So I'm fortunate to work with very talented learners, and I'm going to motivate them to study engineering.
That's always wonderful to hear. So I am very excited to hear that our teacher can see some value in our from our tour. As I said, we are joining you from Volkswagen today, where we are in Wolfsburg. And next, I will be speaking to our winner from Noordwes-universiteit, Amy Valkrod, who was our 2020 winner. You won so long ago, you can't even remember it. All right, so Amy, tell us about your experience.
I've enjoyed every moment of it. It opened a lot of new career opportunities, definitely. My favorite was visiting the Siemens plants because we don't acknowledge all the stuff they actually do. And for me, it was very nice because you didn't see a lot of girls. So I'm actually motivated to be one of the few girls to do engineering as well. So it's an amazing experience.
All right. And in competing with in the competition itself, what did you learn from the various activities that you completed?
It opened a lot of new ideas, the way you think about the problems around you. So the activities actually helped me to gain more experience about how to solve a problem that you think is not as solvable. So I must say the few things we did in the 12 activities we did, it really helped to develop new skills in like the creating an app or creating a new idea.
Awesome. Okay, and would you do this again if you had the opportunity?
I'm currently competing again this year. So yes, I would.
Okay, cool. It's always good to know that you will, if you consider doing it again and you're willing to do all of the assignments on a new problem, then I guess you're really proving that the activities are worth it. And that was even before she came on the tour. So I would understand if she decided after this tour to go and do this. But Amy decided to enter again before even coming here. So, Pabali, you're next. Tell us about your experience in Modiragatsi.
Overall, my experience with the Modiragatsi competition was a very wonderful one. It opened a lot of new doors and it broadened my horizon in terms of my thinking. It helps you think beyond your current situation in terms of the problems, and it also helps you find solutions. And it also gives you a lot of exposure to different concepts in terms of the engineering spectrum, like computational thinking. And I must say, throughout the competition, my favorite activity was the one with the UX design. That was very interesting.
That's awesome. Okay, and from everything that you've experienced in Germany, what is your favorite?
My favorite experience here in Germany definitely has to be the Siemens plant we visited yesterday. It was the automation world. And so basically we learned about measurement intelligence and how the different instruments, or rather the chemical units that they build, are used in industry. So for example, we looked at this very big very big chemical instrument, and with that you can measure the gas that is present in the whole system. So for example, yesterday we were measuring the oxygen present in the system, and this is due to oxygen being very explosive in the presence of other chemicals, as it is highly reactive. So yes.
That's awesome. And Pabalo, as part of your prize, and that's also a prize that this year's winners will win, whether it's an individual or a team that wins, is a Siemens bursary. So seeing what Siemens does and how well they do it, how do you feel as a future scholarship receiver and a potential employee of Siemens in the future?
Personally, I am very excited. I am very sold on the engineering world, first of all. And at first, I thought I knew what I wanted to study, but having exposure to the different divisions that Siemens has, as they have a lot of divisions, I am very confused now. But that is a very good thing, as I have gained a lot of insight into the different types of engineering. And I'm very excited to one day hopefully work for them. And I'm very grateful for the scholarship, I must say.
Okay, that is awesome. I keep on switching the camera on the wrong slide. I'm laughing at myself today. Okay, so you've heard it from them. I think it is a worthwhile opportunity to just learn from the experience, but definitely be having the opportunity to come here, and especially the opportunities that Siemens has created in the plants that we have visited. I know a number of engineers that would definitely trade their front teeth for a visit such as the one that we were receiving this week. We are very, very fortunate, and we are very thankful towards Siemens, who are really making this tour a delight with everything that they have arranged for us. And then also, of course, we wouldn't be here without the funds received from the Merceater. So both our sponsors, we can't do it without you. We are eternally grateful to you. And I am very glad that I get to make goals like these so excited about the future and the possibility of changing the world. Because remember, that is what we do in the Modiragatsi competition, is that we want to change our world, and we want to take a responsibility for seeing the problems, but they're not just complaining about them, but actually addressing them. So Corin, you are sharing my slides for me. So can you please share my slideshow so that I can get to the admin part? And firstly, I would like to start off with reminding you of the Femgineering event that we are hosting with the Faculty of Engineering. This is a great opportunity. I saw the registrations were at 110 girls by yesterday. I haven't checked it since. So remember, we're continuing the theme of Be the Change in the Femgineering event, while the Modiragatsi competition focuses on enabling businesses through technology and solving problems through technology. The Femgineering event focuses on the different disciplines of engineering specifically by hosting you for an entire week. And we join each other on a single day, the 9th of August, when the Modiragatsi 2022 winners will be announced at the event. It will be a joint event between the faculty of joint event that will be shared between the Siemens site and the site in Potch at the university itself. So I hope that you will join us one day in person and a few days, additional days virtually, so that we can teach you everything there is to know about engineering and the amazing women that work in the field already. So we'll be joined by speakers from all around the world. Next one, Corin, please. So this week, I can't believe it's week 9. It feels like yesterday that we started this. So it caught me off guard when I was preparing for our session today. So this week you will focus on intellectual property, and we thank Kesh IP for creating the video materials that you'll use this week. Thank you, Ursula and Izan, for the videos. They really went to a lot of trouble to create those videos, and it looks amazing, and it's really inspiring to see. So you'll have 2 videos to watch and a few answers to give in that regard. So it's not a very technically heavy week this week. So if you have fallen behind, this is a good week to catch up. And then, of course, our team from the Center for Health and Human Performance will focus on self-regulation and coping this week. So it's definitely something that we need, especially going into the exams. I think most of you have started with exams this week. So very valuable content that Neville and Ankabi will share with us today. Next slide, please, Corin. So yes, you see you're really nearing the end now. You've learned about design thinking, computational thinking, user experience design. You have thought about your possible mobile app that you're developing. And this week you'll be finishing intellectual property protection. And then for the last 3 weeks, we will focus on pitching this as a business idea and how to create your final entry. So we are very, very close to the end. Remember that you're entering into the exams now. So the assignments will be open for longer, and the final assignments will only need to be in by these last few ones will only need to be in with the final entry that will need to be in after the exams in the June holidays. So at least watch the videos at this point in time. But if you don't have the time to really focus on this, don't let your academics suffer, because we have given you some assignments and you're now so excited about being here. You may be excited about becoming an engineer or becoming anyone in the technological field. There's so many roles that could be fulfilled. And in terms of the personal development content, remember that we started with the body, then moved on to communication. After this week, we will also be done with the concept of the concept videos on the mind, and then we will be focusing on daring to dream. So I'm super excited about this next part. And without any further ado, I hand over to Ankebi and Neville for the next portion of our live stream today.
Sorry about that. Welcome back. We are very excited today sharing with you about self-regulation and coping. So last week we spoke about mindfulness. You would remember that and what it is and all the related benefits of practicing mindfulness. So you would remember that one of the benefits of mindfulness is to help you to regulate your emotions. So today we're going to dive into self-regulation, and we are going to teach you some coping skills that will help you to effectively regulate your emotions. Presenting with me is Neville, so over to him. Neville, you are on mute.
Same mistake. Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Prof, for helping me there. Just to start off with coping, how people cope with their daily challenges is believed to affect their health and psychological well-being. And within the description of coping, stress is often used because without stress, there is no need to cope. So coping has broadly been defined as a cognitive and behavioral effort to manage specific external and internal demands and conflicts that arise between them, which are evaluated as exhausting a person's resources. So stress can be described as the adverse psychological and physical reaction that you have that occurs within an individual because of their inability to cope with demands that are being made on them. So thus, coping seeks in some way to soften the impact of demands and stress. So then looking at coping mechanisms, there are two main coping strategies. So we have problem-focused coping and we have emotion-focused coping. So in problem-focused coping, efforts are made to change stressful situations through problem-solving, decision-making, and or direct action. So this refers to strategies that you employ to alter or manage sources of stress. So this can include confrontative coping, seeking social support, or plain full problem solving. So in emotion-focused coping, on the other hand, attempts are made to regulate the stressing emotions. So sometimes by changing the meaning of the stressful situation cognitively without actually changing the situation. So emotion-focused coping has to do with the strategies used to manage emotions. So this can include self-control, so in other words, emotional regulation, seeking social support, distancing, positive appraisal, accepting responsibility for that, escape and avoidance, or positive reinforcement and growth. Now, what's interesting is there's also a third category, which we refer to as the dysfunctional strategies of coping. So this is where you focus on the venting of your emotions, behavioral disengagement, mental disengagement, substance use such as alcohol or drug use, but also denial. And for some stresses, problem-focused coping is necessary, but for others, emotion-focused coping is necessary. But these strategies, we have to be able to regulate ourselves in terms of emotions, decision-making, and taking action.
Okay, so what self-regulation is? Self-regulation refers to the conscious as well as non-conscious processes that enable one to guide your thoughts, your feelings, as well as your behaviors in a purposeful manner. So self-regulation includes the ability to regulate your reactions to strong emotions like, say, for instance, frustration, excitement, anger, or embarrassment. Also to calm yourself after something exciting or upsetting happened, focus on a task, and also to refocus your attention when it was diverted for whatever reason, and or to focus on a new task, to control your impulses and urges, and also to act in ways that will help you to maintain a good relationship with other people. So now that you know what self-regulation is and why it is important, let's have a quick look and the overview of the various brain regions implicated in self-regulation. With the prefrontal cortex, the front part of your brain, the most notable for executive functions that support the various cognitive processes that are involved in self-regulation. So the three main areas we're going to focus on, and which is particularly important in self-regulation, are the ventromedial prefrontal cortex, including the orbital frontal cortex, the lateral Pfc, as well as the ACC, or the anterior cingulate cortex. It's not necessary that you remember all the difficult names, so this is just for explanation purposes. So let's look at the first brain region involved in self-regulation. So ventro means to the front and medial means towards the middle. So this is the front and the middle part of the prefrontal cortex, the front part of your brain. So the ventromedial PFC plays an important role in regulating as well as inhibiting our responses to our emotions. So the VMPFC seems to use our emotional reactions to model our behavior and to control our emotional reactions in certain social situations. And damage to this area of the brain involves a general dysregulation of social behavior, along with the difficulty controlling primary physiological drives. Next is the lateral PFC. So lateral, which is the opposite of medial and means away from the middle, so more towards the side of the brain. So the lateral PFC is the part of the PFC that is responsible for the implementation of cognitive control, which requires multiple cognitive processes, such as, say, for instance, your working memory, your attentional selection and planning. And many of these processes are affected by the reward system of your brain. People who experience damage to this area of the brain struggle with planning, with initiating behaviors, especially complex behaviors requiring the maintenance of multiple goals. So one commonly observed symptom can be ascribed as kind of apathetic listlessness, coupled with a loss of motivational drive, even when it comes to things as important as gather the interest necessary to stay in school or to approach your projects for this competition you are currently participating in. And the last important brain structure involved in self-regulation is the anterior cingulate cortex, or in short, the ACC, which is part of the limbic system, or your emotion part of your brain, which we also refer to as the emotion regulation system. So from the name, you can deduce that the ACC is responsible for numerous functions, such as emotional expression, emotional awareness, and also your ability to interpret emotional cues and choose appropriate emotional responses based on that stimuli. It's also responsible for decision-making, for pain management, attention allocation, anticipation, as well as the detection of error and the activation of the autonomic nervous system. So when a person experiences damage in this part of the brain, this might be related to inappropriate emotions, a lack of fear, so doing stupid things for that matter, a lack of sensation of pain, and learning impairments, and then, of course, self-regulation. So also, now that you know what brain regions are involved, let's quickly look at why self-regulation is a very important mental skill to have. It's firstly crucial for goal-directed behavior and has been related to many consequential outcomes in life, including your physical as well as mental health, psychological well-being, ethical decision-making, as well as strong interpersonal relationships. Secondly, self-regulation will help you to learn in school because it gives you the ability to pay attention to what is happening in the classroom or what is happening now to help you to pay attention during the sessions. It will also help you to behave in socially acceptable ways because it gives you the ability to control your urges. Remember in the effective relationship communication session we had a few weeks back, the example of you waiting for your friend at the coffee shop who was late for your appointment. So I think you can still remember or recall that example. So if you hadn't had a good ability to regulate your emotions, you might have gotten angry and left without letting her know that you are leaving. In addition to help you maintain good relationships, self-regulation will also help you to form and to build new relationships because it gives you the ability to take turns in conversations, for instance, or tasks, to share and also to express your emotions in appropriate ways. And the last benefit of good self-regulation is that it will help you to become more independent since it will give you the ability to make appropriate decisions about your behavior and also to learn how to behave in novel situations with less guidance from another person. So you will remember this slide from one of our previous presentations and also remember that it's not something that happens to you that makes you feel or behave in a certain way, rather our thoughts, our beliefs, or the meanings that we attach to the event that produce our emotional and our behavioral responses. So let's see how different thoughts can alter our emotions, or in other words, regulate our emotions. Again, try to recall the example we used in the effective relationship communication session, the coffee date you had with your friend who was an hour late. So say, for example, while you were waiting for your friend, you were thinking, I don't think she really wants to spend time with me. Maybe I'm not a good enough friend, good enough person to be friends with her. How do you think you might have felt? I predict here on the consequence level that you have felt or might have felt disappointed and even sad. On the other hand, say for instance, your thoughts were in the line such as maybe she got stuck in traffic or some kind of hold up at work or with her studies. Do you think that you would have felt sad and disappointed? I guess not. So you might probably feel worried about your friend and again try to get hold of her. So can you see how the different thoughts about exactly the same situation, so activating event, led to different emotions? So in other words, you can then use your emotions or your thoughts, to regulate your emotions. And it is furthermore very important to be aware of what is going through your mind in a certain situation, especially when you are experiencing a negative emotion. Because we can't change something, in this case, our thoughts, if we are not aware of them in the first place. And to become aware of our thoughts, you should be mindful, the topic we have discussed last week in more depth. So at times, our inner voice or our self-talk, or if you think back of the ABC, the B level, that can get out of control and let us become a victim of emotional hijacking. In other words, we might experience overwhelming emotions when we get hijacked by our emotions. I think you are all well aware of the instance when Will Smith slapped Chris Rock when he made a joke about Will's wife. So did he maybe lack skills to regulate his emotions in that certain situation? So a typical thought pattern of emotional hijacking is what we refer to as mind traps or cognitive distortions or thinking errors, whatever you want to call it. So mind traps are ways that our mind convinces us of things that aren't necessarily true. So this way, our thinking can actually reinforce negative thinking as well as negative emotions, keeping us feeling bad about ourselves and interfere with our ability to self-regulate our own emotions. So as I'm going to go through a few examples of different mind traps, so try and recognize which are the culprits that might add fuel to your emotional fire and undermine your ability to regulate yourself. So the first mind trap that is happens very often is referred to as polarized thinking, or often referred to as black and white thinking. So that is, instead of seeing a variation, this line of thinking excludes all possible outcomes to only black and white options. So it's only success or failure, win or lose, a friend or foe, for example. But there's often more nuances to those two extremes. That's the first mind trap. Secondly is overgeneralization. It's a tongue twister for an Afrikaans-speaking person, but anyway. So in this case, it means that taking the negative outcome of one event or experience and concluding all similar experiences or events will result in the same outcome. So, or you conclude that the one bad outcome was due to an inherent character flaw. So, for example, going on one bad date means you are terrible at relationship. So it only happened once, and that doesn't mean you are going to be terrible at future relationships as well. Next is labeling, and I think this is one we all very often do and step in. So in this example, you identify with your shortcomings. So this is the same as tripping on a broken sidewalk, or instead of saying, the city should fix the sidewalk, it's dangerous, you say, oh, of course I tripped, I'm clumsy. So again, you identify with your shortcomings. Next, jumping to conclusions. Again, I think something that we very often do. There are two examples of this. The one is what we refer to as mind reading. So this is assuming other people are reacting negatively to you, even though there is no evidence for it. So for example, the security guard at work didn't say hello this morning. So you assume it's because they don't like you anymore. It could be because they were distracted or just having a bad day or just didn't see you. The other example of jumping to a conclusion is what we refer to as fortune telling, which is predicting things will turn out badly. Also, again, you don't have any evidence. For example, you decide not to apply to a job or a scholarship or whatever the case may be, in which you are objectively qualified because you tell yourself that you won't get it anyway, so you just don't apply. Another mind trap is what we call or refer to as personalization blame. So in the case of personalization, you may blame yourself for an outcome that you weren't entirely responsible for. So for instance, you are on a creative team for a big client. Unexpectedly, the client decides to cancel all accounts and withdraw from the agency entirely. So while there are numerous people or multiple people working on this client's account, you put all the blame on yourself for the client's decision. The second one is blame. So that is when you overlook how your own behavior could have contributed to an outcome. So for instance, perhaps the security guard from the example above didn't say hello to you this morning because you never say hello back. and today was the day they just stopped trying. Next is what we refer to as magnification or minimization. So in magnification, this is an example of taking a single bad outcome and blowing it way out of proportion. An example might be that you went on a date that went poorly. So this means that for the rest of your life, you will never find someone to settle down with, which means you will die alone and no one will come to your funeral. So can you see that with magnification, you can catastrophize a certain situation and really blow it out of proportion? Minimization, on the other hand, is taking something that should rightly be of concern and then you shrink it. And you shrink the importance of this situation. Say, for instance, you have pains in your stomach, but you tell yourself it will go away on its own and you don't have to go to the doctor. Okay, over to you, Neville, again. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. Okay, so I'm going to be looking at self-regulation skills, and a key part within regulating yourself, as we have seen, is to regulate your emotions. And to regulate your emotions, you have to regulate your cognition, so your thoughts. So these two aspects essentially help us to manage and then regulate behavior. So for this section of the presentation, I'm going to try and make it as practical as I possibly can. So I'm essentially going to focus on 3 key skills. And each of these 3 skills will be made up of sub-skills. So the first one that I want to look at is to understand and name emotions. So what this basically means is for you to be able to be aware of an emotion and understand what it means and then be able to name it. So the function and the obstacle of emotions is focused on and how this will relate to your cognition and your behavior. The second skill relates to changing your emotions, specifically those that you perceive as being unwanted. And the 3 skills in that you can utilize is to check the facts, opposite action, and problem solving. But we're going to get to that a little bit later. And the third skill is then to reduce the vulnerability that you have to an emotion. So this refers to not allowing an unwanted emotion to have a great or negative impact on you, or your thoughts, or your behavior. So it doesn't mean that you're not allowed to experience any emotion. It just means that it doesn't have such a magnitude of an impact on you. So the skill that we focus on here is to build mastery and cope ahead. And this may give us a sense of confidence when we are faced with overwhelming challenges. And when you go through an experience, you actually have an action plan. So starting off with understanding and naming emotions, this will be the first skill that we look at. Inherent within this lies the skill of awareness. And awareness becomes a key part in regulating yourself, because if you are unaware, then how do you know what you have to regulate? So understanding and naming an emotion actually facilitates awareness of the emotions and the thoughts that you have. So the first thing that we need to know is that emotion, what's the function of an emotion? And emotions communicate. They communicate to other people, but they also communicate to ourselves. And through understanding emotions, you start to understand what emotions are communicating to you, and you start to understand the emotion itself. And by understanding emotions, you also must understand that emotions and emotional behavior play a functional role within you. And changing that emotion it can be difficult. But understanding it lies within its function and what reinforces the emotion. So in order to regulate or change, we must first be able to identify. And therein lies the importance of understanding and naming emotions. I'm just going to show you a quick video here. Focus on the emotion and the thought and the behavior of the individual in this video. Okay, thank you for the video. So when you look at the video and the way the person reacted, I want you, just to make it practical, you can write it down for yourself. I'm not going to ask any questions, but just looking at his behavior, what do you think he might have been thinking? What do you think he might have been going through? And describing through what he went through, you can start to see maybe what he was feeling or what emotions he was experiencing. And therein comes the trick of the trade, because understanding an emotion is much more than just being able to say that I was angry or I was sad. So here are 4 things that you can actually utilize in order to be able to better understand and describe and name an emotion. So firstly, describe the prompting event. So looking at the video, what would you say was the prompting event? Secondly, you describe the motivation to action. Thirdly, it's describing the communication of that emotion to others and describing that communication to myself. So what did it communicate to myself? So if we look at those 4 specific things, so describe the prompting event. So to understand an emotion, we must be able to know where it came from. So what caused the emotion to arise? Motivation to action then actually means what we often refer to as emotion-driven behavior. So the action that you take based on your emotional motivation. So the question that you ask is, how did my emotion motivate my action? And then the third one, describing what my emotion communicated to others. So what does that emotion and that action actually say about me to other people? And then the last one is, what did your emotion communicate to yourself? And you can see when you rewatch the video, he goes through a lot of different types of emotions. What did you take from it? Because that's what he communicated to you. And then what do you think he actually felt, what the emotion communicated to him? And so practically within your own life, these are important questions that you can ask yourself. And this will allow you to increase awareness and perspective in order to identify actually what needs to be regulated. So then we move on towards actually changing then an unwanted emotion. So firstly, checking the facts, opposite action, and problem solving. So now that we've identified emotions and we understand their function, we can move towards change. So first and foremost, checking the facts is the first step in changing that emotion or behavior. So it's a cognitive process that you engage in order to determine change. So the question here that you ask yourself is, does my emotion and behavioral reaction fit the facts of the event? So once again, this shows you actually how important it is to identify, understand and name emotions, because otherwise you would not be able to effectively and meaningfully engage in a process of change. So checking the facts and the results thereof then points to what skill you need to utilize. So checking the facts leads you to decide between opposite action and problem solving. So opposite action is a skill that is often much easier to explain than it is to apply. So the skill is utilized when the facts and the emotion do not match. So then you do the opposite of what your emotion wants you to do. So please keep in mind that we're not talking about polar opposite or extreme. So if you feel extremely angry, then you have to do the polar opposite of being angry, which is being happy. We still want to keep it realistic. So for example, if you don't want to get out of bed because you have little energy, the first step is just get out of bed. That's the opposite action of what your emotion is telling you. With problem solving is when your emotion and behavior actually matches the situation. It matches the facts. Then we engage in problem solving. And there are various possible ways of solving a problem. But here are just a few questions that you can ask yourself in order to determine how you need to problem solve. So firstly, ask yourself, what is the emotion I want to change? What event is prompting my emotion? What are my interpretations, thoughts, and assumptions about that event? Maybe am I assuming a threat? and what's the catastrophe? So what am I actually envisioning happening? And does my emotion and or its intensity actually fit the facts? And so in order to check the facts, these are just a few questions that you can ask yourself to determine actually what you want to change and which, should I use opposite action or should I use problem solving? Yeah, I just wanted to show you a graph of actually some of the steps that you can take. So firstly, you'll see there at the top, it's ask yourself, does the emotion fit the facts? So then it's either yes or no. So if we first follow the yes, then you ask yourself, is acting on this emotion effective? So this is where you actually start to check the wise mind. So now it fits the facts, but is acting on that emotion in my best interest actually? Let's say that it's a yes. Then you have to be mindful of that emotion and you have to act on that emotion and you have to problem solve if it's an unwanted emotion. But then it's also a place where you have to radically accept that consequences. So let's say, for example, that it was, does the emotion fit the facts? It was yes. Is acting on this emotion effective? And you say no. So then you do not act on that emotion or action or urge, and you reconsider the possibility of opposite action because you know that acting on that emotion, emotion-driven behavior, is not in your best interest. So let's say, does the emotion fit the facts? And the answer is no. You go to, is acting on this emotion effective? So it's the same question. If the answer is no, you don't act on that emotion, you change thoughts to fit the facts. So now you've identified which thoughts don't fit the facts and you engage in opposite action. But if it is a yes, acting on this emotion is effective, it will be in my best interest, you have to be mindful once again of the emotion and you have to act and accept the consequences of that emotion. This is also somewhere where you can reconsider opposite action as a way to get the what you view as the goal or the your best interest out of the situation. So when we look at when we say problem solving, so when your emotion and your reaction is justified and you want to focus on the situation, you either want to change the situation or you can avoid the situation. So problem solving can then involve coping strategies, effective coping, but it's also conscious and focused effort. Just some types of problem situations that you can maybe identify or categorize them as. So it's situations or people that cause painful emotions, situations or people that you want to avoid. Maybe it's just a one-time problem situation or a repeated problem situation, or it's repeated failures to inhibit destructive or ineffective behavior. So you keep repeating the same behavior that's ineffective, or it's a chronic problem situation. But it's important for us to look at the type of problem situation we may encounter and just to know what action that we actually have to take. So in solving a problem, just a few steps for you. It is important to first of all describe the problem. So whether it's the individual, the action, or the situation. So focus on that and why it's problematic and what obstacles you are experiencing in solving that problem. So it's in that point that you check the facts of the situation. So return to some of the other questions that I mentioned previously, just in order to guide you of becoming aware of that situation. So we shift our focus then to the goal, specifically what we want to achieve through problem solving. And this can mean different things for different people. But we can now actually start to explore possible solutions through brainstorming. And when you are brainstorming, we don't want too many solutions. Keep it focused, keep it simple, keep it detailed still, but keep it as simple as possible because you still have to choose the best solution. So that's when you'll know what the best solution is based on the goal that you want to achieve. And so measure it against your goal, and then you ask yourself, did I achieve what I want to? So opposite action is what I explained previously before. So we know that it is doing the opposite of an emotional urge. So it is an effective strategy that you can use for change, and a few instances when opposite action works best. So first, when maybe knowing the facts doesn't change how you experience the event, the emotion does not fit the situation, or the emotion is keeping you from your goals. So it's difficult for you to cope with that because it's keeping you from your goals. And you know that coping with the emotion, so change, will actually help you to reach your goals. Or when you may be avoiding a situation or even emotion that leads you to avoid certain actions. So the last one that I mentioned before is building mastery and coping ahead. So mastery actually, at times when we may not have the self-belief that we are able to regulate ourselves, especially in situations that are challenging. So building mastery is actually something you do in the here and now to prepare yourself for the future. So mastery therefore involves doing certain activities that build competence, self-confidence, a feeling of being in control, and feeling capable. So we do this because we know that there may be a time where we feel resistant emotions, and that can be powerful and communicate something else that our brain is actually telling us that's not necessarily true. So to increase a positive sense of self, we actually build mastery. So how we build mastery is we do at least one thing per day. And when we refer to one thing, it can be something small, it can be something big, but we don't want it to be impossible. We want it to be just the right amount of difficulty so that when we achieve it, we actually feel competent, we feel confident, we feel like we are in control, and we feel like we are capable. Then we plan for success, not failure, and we gradually increase that difficulty over time of the challenges that you complete every day. And then also look for a challenge. So firstly, try to do an activity each day that we can actually categorize according to the difficulty. So this will help us to ensure that we choose an activity for the day that is realistic, but also challenging enough to build a sense of confidence and competence. Yet we do not want an activity that is easy, but also impossible. So secondly, when we plan, we want to plan for success, not failure. So this means that when we look at activities, we want to plan as if it will be successful. And it's purely as simple as that. We want to plan for it and plan our day as if we're going to be successful in that activity. And we can always start easy and increase the difficulty as we go along. With each activity that you complete, we gain confidence and competence, helping us to be more confident in the approach when we take on certain activities. And then the last thing is looking for a challenge. So it's easy to wait for a challenge to come and say, when that challenge comes, then we will tackle it. But be aware of possible challenges and opportunities that come along your way. And it is at that time that you start grabbing them and plan to successfully complete them. And then the last one, connecting to the previous one of mindfulness. I think mindfulness is a wonderful way in which you can learn to cope ahead. So mindfulness being very helpful here, you would remember it from the discussion before, but just a reminder and some few steps that you can actually follow through combining coping ahead and mindfulness techniques. So first of all, when you describe the problem situation, whether it's now or it's in the future, describing that problem situation kind of just grounds you in the here and now, and just gaining perspective of what I'm dealing with. And it is at that time that you can decide what skill to use. And this is why describing the problem is important, as you are more able to accurately determine what skill best fits the situation. And this can also be a mindfulness skill. So then imagine the situation. So this is where you imagine yourself being in that situation, and it's almost like role playing within your mind. And I want you to imagine confronting that difficulty or that challenge. And this is why mindfulness also helps, because it helps you to ground yourself, but also be able to envision yourself facing that or confronting that difficulty or challenge. And then with the fourth step, rehearse the coping. So now you're confronting the challenge. So while you're still present within that role playing in your mind or imagining the situation, imagine how you're going to cope with it. Imagine walking through step by step what you're going to do in order to cope with the situation. And then in that, practice mindfulness. See yourself going through relaxation techniques. See yourself breathing. See yourself focusing on senses. And you can use the various techniques that you have learned in previous sessions in order to practice relaxation and being in the wise mind. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. Ankerby and Neville. I would just like to share my screen again. We're moving on to the Q&A now. Just quickly want to start sharing my screen. So we're moving on to the Q&A now, and we have one question so far. I'm going to read it quickly. The question is, how do you know if acting on an emotion is the right path to reaching your goal?
Can you please repeat the question? Sorry about that.
The question is, how do you know if acting on an emotion is the right path to reaching your goal?
Okay. I think if I can refer back to the mindfulness session of last week, if you think about the what skills of mindfulness and the how skills, so to ask yourself the question, will this behavior be effective? So I think that's a very good question to guide you to determine. So if I want to react on this emotion, will my behavior be effective given the outcome I will get? So I think that's a question to keep in mind, just to ask yourself always, will this be effective or is this effective? I hope it answers the question more or less.
I think it definitely does. Thank you, Prof. Ankerby. We don't have any more questions thus far, but I would just like to make a comment. And this was the last session that we spent on the mind, and I think it's these last three topics that we've spoken about they're quite difficult topics to master. It's so easily to just root to your natural way of always doing things, and for example, when you're in a difficult situation, to just react. And it's difficult to just take a step back and think, okay, listen, am I being mindful now? Am I overreacting? Is this the right decision that I'm making? So yes, I think these last three sessions have really been sessions where we can really improve ourselves, and we can improve forever. We will never be able to reach a stage where you will be completely mindful. There's always something that will trigger you that might not trigger someone else. So yes, I think it was very informative. I'm just checking the WhatsApp or the WhatsApp group and the YouTube live session to see if there are any more questions. I don't see anything
I can
else.
just add on your comment while you're looking for other questions is I just want to tell the participants, don't get discouraged, because I know it's a lot of information and you might think that, oh no, this is too much for me. But remember what I said in the previous session as well. We teach you skills, and a skill means that it's something you can learn to do. So don't think you have to be efficient immediately. So you must take whatever works for you. So we give you a lot of skills, but not all skills will work for everybody. So choose something that you resonate with, that relates with you, and take that skill and try and make it your own. So yeah, again, it's a lot of information, but don't get discouraged and just keep on practicing these skills, and it will eventually become part of your automatic response and of your automatic kind of repertoire.
Thank you, Prof. Ankerby. I really agree with that as well. I didn't see any questions, so I'm going to continue with the slideshow. And then whenever you have a question, you can just post it in the WhatsApp group or in the live chat. I'm still monitoring it. Okay. Okay, so then I would just like to remind you again about our social media accounts on Instagram as well as on Facebook. Whenever you are working on Modiragatsi 2022, you're welcome to tag us when you post your photo, or even in your story. You can even tag us in your story and we will gladly share it to our story as well. And then let me just check the WhatsApp group one final time. I see the audience is quiet again tonight, not so many questions as usual. Yes, but I think thank you for everyone who joined. Thank you, Prof. Ankabi. Thank you, Neville. Thank you that you enlightened us with your topics today. I really learned a lot once again, and it's also something that I'm going to implement in my life. So yes, next week we will be moving on to the topic of daring to dream, and I'm quite excited about that. And next week, Prof. Leta will also be joining us again from South Africa. So I'm also excited to see her back. Okay, I see there's another question, but it is not related to our topic. It is, when will the NWU start responding to 2023 applications for extended programs? I will answer that question later in the live chat. I just have to do my research on that. But yeah, so thank you for tonight. Thank you that everyone from the audience joined in. Thank you, Prof. Ankabi and Neville. And then we will see you next week again. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.